Hey everyone, James Azar here with the CyberHub Engage podcast. Welcome to our Saturday CISO special. I have a very special guest on our episode today. Someone who I've known for a very long time. Someone who has so much knowledge in this industry that's going to be a really fascinating, amazing conversation. So make sure you've got nothing on your plate. Get your cup of coffee ready on this Saturday morning, because we're about to go through a journey of cybersecurity, cyber analytics, and so much more. We're going to be right back with Kausar Kenning, VP of Cyber Analytics at a large financial company. Right after these messages from our sponsors, we'll be right back. Stay tuned. All right, friends, let's talk about one of our podcast supporters, PlexTrack. When it comes to security assessments, I think we can all agree on one thing: reporting sucks. I know I hate writing reports, which is why I pawn it off to my staff, but not all of you could do that. Red teams hate that there's no platform that gives them what they need to efficiently and consistently deliver their best reports. Blue teams and CISOs and VPs hate copying and pasting findings from all these multiple sources, all these different Excels, into some sort of ticketing system that then generates some sort of analytics reports that's really jimmy-rigged. And so PlexTrack, our sponsors and friends, have finally solved the pain of security assessment reporting for the red and blue teams all in one. For red teams, PlexTrack's custom templating and write-up repository ensures consistency across reports. Reports can be delivered in the browser or exported to a custom Word and PDF document if you still live in that world. For blue team, PlexTrack aggregates security issues into dynamic reports that enables remediation collaboration. Further analytics visually tell the story of the security posture to the C-suite, helping give a complete and final picture for everyone. As a loyal CyberHub Engage listener, you have a special offer of a free 30-day, no contracts, no credit cards, no risks trial of their amazing platform. So go to plextrack.com/CyberHub. Again, that's PlexTrack, PLEXTRACS for Charlie, /CyberHub to get your free month of trial on their platform. I will tell you this, I've seen it, I love it. People who have tried this platform have given us rave reviews on it. It really does simplify the red team, blue team communication and helps us all be far more organized in reporting our vulnerabilities. So again, go to plextrack.com/CyberHub for a free 30-day trial. Hey everyone, I really want you to help me in supporting our early sponsor, Get Smart Eye. So Get Smart Eye is still in beta testing, but what Get Smart Eye is, it's an amazing app that lets you control your privacy, whether it be documents, pictures, anything that you want to share with your friends or not. Think of Snapchat, only no screenshots and no one else looking over it. So if you travel a lot, if you're in airports, coffee shops, shared workspaces, and you care about your privacy, Get Smart Eye is the right app for you to protect your privacy. And here's the deal. Get Smart Eye is still in beta testing. I use the app all the time. In fact, some of you know that I travel a lot, and when I do, I don't like people looking at my screen at airports. I do everything off my phone, and as such, I use Get Smart Eye for all my sensitive documents and all my planning. So here's what you need to do to be one of our early technology adapters, an exclusive offer for CyberHub Engage listeners. Text 41411, again, that's 41411, 41411, and type in the message of your text, Smart Eye. Then reply to the SMS that you're going to get with the letter Y, like Yankee, and download the Apple Test Flight app. Then go back to your SMS and you'll get a link to download the Smart Eye app. Download the Smart Eye app and use it. Again, this is an early offer for only CyberHub Engage users. Text 41411. Again, that's 41411 with Smart Eye in the message. Hey everyone, want to talk to you about our newest sponsor, a company I've known for a few years now. Been a follower of them and appreciate their work, Unbound Technologies. They're finally on board with us here at CyberHub Engage. So let me tell you a little bit about what they do. If you don't have a secure cryptographic foundation, chances are you're struggling to understand the status and security of your cryptographic keys. Unbound's key security and management experts can help with that. Their FIPS validated cryptographic key security and management platform allows you to maintain visibility of all your keys, whether on-prem or in the cloud, without compromising on security. Know exactly where your keys are and how they're being used. Manage them all with a single pane of glass. Automate operations in your organizations. Save time and manpower as well as money. With Unbound, your enterprise can achieve agility, efficiency, gain control, and reduce risk. Today, Unbound is giving all of you an amazing white paper to look at where you can manage your enterprise key management. I've actually read this white paper. It's great. It's helped me a ton with managing my enterprise key management program. You can go to bit.ly/get-unbound. Again, bit.ly/get-unbound. You'll see the description on our website, on this episode description, and everywhere else. Click that link, go download that white paper, bit.ly/get-unbound. Folks, I want to take a moment and talk to you about CyberHub USA, one of our longest sponsors. So for full disclosure, before we get started, I want you to know I am a partner at CyberHub USA. That's why our podcast is called the CyberHub Engage Podcast. But if it wasn't for my partner support, I wouldn't have been able to deliver the content that we do each and every single day. But let me talk a bit about what CyberHub USA does and how it can benefit you and your organization. CyberHub USA are cyber business operation experts. They help bridge business and cybersecurity to enhance a company's security posture through so many different ways of doing so. As a boutique advisory and consulting firm, they work with CISOs, CIOs, CTOs, CEOs, and board members on identifying the proper and right cybersecurity strategy and do everything in between, from creating work plans to identifying the right vendors, to helping in budgeting, to ensuring third-party viability, to helping with tabletop exercises and preparedness for the day when it happens, not if. CyberHub USA has a team of experts from all over the globe that's ready to deploy at a moment's notice to help any organization deal with the most complex or even the most basics of cybersecurity challenges. You can find out more by going to cyberhubusa.co. Again, cyberhubusa.co, cyberhubusa.co, and you can get a free consultation with one of CyberHub USA's experts for absolutely free by mentioning the CyberHub Engage podcast. Again, cyberhubusa.co, cyberhubusa.co. Get a free consultation for free with one of CyberHub USA's experts, absolutely free, by mentioning the CyberHub Engage podcast. And now back to the show. All right, folks, we are back. Make sure you support our sponsors. Without them, this podcast wouldn't be where it is. Their financial support helps us keep bringing you content at a high level without selling out so far. Kausar, welcome to the CyberHub Engage podcast. Finally, 2 years and some odd time in the making.
All right.
I finally get you in the hot seat.
Well, thank you so much for having me, James. I really appreciate it.
I'm so psyched.
So am I.
Like, now we finally get to record all of our fun, like, lunches and coffee hours.
Right?
Like, so for those who are listening, and it's your first time listening, or for those avid listeners, Kausar was one of the driving kind of like the beginning of kind of this podcast, because it was our mutual mentor, Wes Knight, who is retiring next month.
So sad.
So sad. Party time. That's all I can say. Who kind of said, James, you should really record this stuff and put it out there, because a lot of the content out there is very sales driven. Mm-hmm. And, you know, we've had, I can't even remember. I don't even count our conversations anymore.
Yeah, it's been a lot.
It's been a lot. It's been a long time. But you have a very interesting background, because you're not like every person who comes on this show. Not everyone has a background of cyber. So introduce our guest a little bit to where you started and how you ended up in your current kind of role and your progression.
Sure. So I started in data analytics and data management many, many years ago and got into fraud. And that's where I really started to look into, I actually got into cyber by accident while I was looking into fraud. And it turned out that I was doing an audit on fraud related issues and found a lot of strange traffic happening and had to dive into it. found out that one of our clients had actually made good on attacking us because they were upset about some contractual terms. And that led me down the whole path of cybersecurity. And I got really lucky. I was at a company where the CISO unfortunately had no staff under him. And so I volunteered to help him out because I just found it fascinating. And he was really happy to have me because he could give me whatever he had a lot on his plate. So he just kept helping me out. And I really got like a one-on-one session with him. And it really helped me learn and get my feet wet in cybersecurity. And it was just the fraud and cybersecurity are so interrelated that I kind of feel like this has been my path for so long. And now I'm in cybersecurity, have been here for a few years now. And I got to thank Wes Knight because he was that one person that once I met him, he really turned it around for me, and he just introduced me to a whole world of people. And I got to pick the brains of so many different CISOs. And it's been extremely enlightening. I've just learned a lot over the past couple of years. So now, yeah, my approach is always risk-based, data-driven approach to cybersecurity and to fraud. So a lot of analytics going into this space.
It's really interesting because when we hear the word fraud, we think of credit card fraud. The word fraud and cyber don't always go together. There's that disconnect, and I feel like we kind of need to get rid of that because we don't really call cyber fraud. We'll call it BEC compromise, which kind of, the town of Erie, Colorado. We both lived in Colorado at one point. We know Erie. And so they just fell through a business email compromise and so many others. But why is it that the word fraud isn't heard in cyber?
I think it's because fraud was there for so long. And you had the traditional fraud, like the wire fraud, the check fraud.
Right.
You've always had that. And cybersecurity, while it was there, I think it really became a household word very recently compared to fraud. So I think when everyone focused on cybersecurity, it's this new hot thing, and they forgot that, hey, if you look at a business use case for what happens, like think about insider threat. You have insider threat, somebody decides we want to make some profit off the PII data I have here. They reach out to someone on the dark web, and we've actually seen this happen. They'll reach out, they'll sell their PII data to somebody. That person then sells it to a hacker who then kicks off a credential stuffing attack, and then it results in fraud. So when I'm looking at these business use cases, and actually not just business use cases, but actual incidents happening, when you start digging for root cause, you find this incredible cycle of behavior. And while all cybersecurity attacks do not end in fraud, a lot of it, the hackers are trying to get something. They're either trying to get money, they're trying to get IP, something of value. So it does result in some type of loss to the company. Now for us, and all the companies I've been at, it's always been they're looking for money. They're looking for RIP. So in that way, yeah, I think it's just a matter of fraud. It's a little more of an old school term and concept. And cybersecurity just became this really new hot thing. So people really haven't combined the two together. But I think looking at the results of what that cybersecurity attack was all about, I think that's why we have to start pulling in fraud and start looking at them both at the same time.
So it's interesting because from a corporate perspective, fraud doesn't go together, but our friends at Secret Service, they've kind of upgraded the fraud. They use the term cyber fraud, but it seems like it's only when we're talking to a Secret Service agent that we hear the term cyber fraud.
Right.
And then everywhere else, it doesn't really exist.
I think it's more of just the way a corporation is divided. So you've got your fraud team and you've got your cybersecurity team, and then you have your AML team. We've divided in corporate America. So I think that's why people really do think of it as silos, but it really isn't.
It's all in one.
It is.
I mean, it's all encompassing.
Completely.
It's all encompassing because, you look at ACH fraud. We all, in banking, we call it ACH fraud, but it's cyber driven.
Completely.
Cyber driven, 100%. It's hacking something.
Right.
And then turning around and turning it into cyber fraud.
There you go. And I think that's a link a lot of people miss. But when you look at any ACH fraud, who are the first people who are deployed to start working on it? The analytics team in cybersecurity, and of course the SOC team and everybody else, that you're looking at, okay, what is happening all of a sudden? How are they attacking us? What are they trying to get to? It's cyber who first gets that notice, and then you start to see the fraud as a result of those attacks.
That always fascinates me in that piece, because the more I see cyber, the more I see fraud, credit card fraud, ACH fraud, wire fraud, check fraud, which is still rampant today because it's so easy. I was exposed to a case where these hackers, what they were doing is they were getting bank account information, so routing number, account number, taking out checks, printing them, because no one checks that. The check printers don't check if you really own the account. They could care less.
Right.
Getting a checkbook and essentially go into an old trick. Catch me if you can. Hey, can I write the check $40 over? Sure.
Yeah, exactly.
Account clears. Yeah. No questions. And only then does the business realize, oh, smokes, we're in a problem here.
Right. After the fact.
It's so if you look at fraud investigations, they've been around for a while. I mean, Frank Abagnale Jr. with the FBI, the Catch Me If You Can character, I've heard him speak a few times. I've had the chance to interact with him a little bit. Very, very fascinating. But he now works for the FBI cyber fraud division in the FBI.
Oh, interesting.
And, because you started in kind of like fraud and data analytics, what tactics from there have helped come into the cybersecurity world and were adopted by the cybersecurity world from the traditional aspects of fraud investigations?
Well, I think that any type of analytics you're doing to understand fraud, to figure out the root cause of it, I mean, you have to think about it in the way that data is going to tell you the whole story. So no matter what you're doing with fraud, I just take those same data analytic techniques and methods and put them into cybersecurity, because it's the same thing. You're trying to figure out what was the root cause of this fraud, just like what was the root cause of this attack? Where did it come from? So it's basically you're using those same techniques and figuring out, how did this happen? How do we prevent it next time? And it's using, if you think about, there are so many different frameworks in data science and data analytics. And the first thing is always, what are you trying to figure out? So once you have, whether it's fraud, whether it's cybersecurity, whether it's anything else, any other specialty, you use that same methodology of, what am I trying to figure out? What are my data points here? Do I need to cleanse my data? Do I understand my data? And then let's move forward and figure out some model or some algorithm that will help me understand this. So when you're looking at fraud, for instance, you've always have, I'm going to pick on ACH fraud because, like you said, it's rampant. Every single FI has seen it. When you have ACH fraud, your first thing is, all right, how did this happen? Where did it come from? Once you get that piece figured out, then the same thing goes with the cybersecurity piece of it, because you're looking at it going, all right, was this credential stuffing? Was it an inside job? What was this? So you're using all your same data points, the methodology, I should say, using the same methodology to figure out fraud and cybersecurity. To me, it's like it's the same tactics. It's the same practice. It's just a matter of understanding, hey, what is your business question? What are you really looking at?
Is it the same process? Meaning, like if you took a fraud investigation kind of like playbook and you compared it to a cyber investigation playbook, would you say that they are identical?
Maybe not identical, because you do have different data sources and you have different data points, but in terms of how you're going to attack the problem, pretty much.
See, to me that's one of those similarities between traditional fraud investigations to the cyber fraud investigations. Is there's really now more data to help you investigate fraud from a cyber perspective, because it's all data driven, whereas in before, it was human driven.
Right.
And that's a harder data set to gather. Not as reliable always.
No. I think humans are probably, we bring too much emotion into it. We bring in our own biases. So I really do enjoy the fact that this is very much data driven. I can pretty much get, with all the vendors that we have, all the different tools and services we have so much intel coming into us all the time. You have stuff coming from FS-ISAC, you have information coming from all the different vendors like ThreatMetrics or iovation. Just and volumes of data that you're hit with. The problem now is I have so much data, which pieces of data are actually relevant to what I'm trying to do. So it's almost gotten to a point where it's data overload, and you really need the talented folks who can figure out which of these data points are relevant to what I'm actually trying to figure out.
And so that kind of transitions us perfectly into data analytics, because there's so much data, so much data. Very few people quite comprehend how to use all this data. How do you start laying out what data you need, what data you don't need, and kind of like really starting to empower data analytics into cybersecurity?
Well, I'm going to go back to the frameworks that we use with data science and data analytics. So I favored the CRISP-DM methodology, and I've used this for years now. And basically, it's a framework for how you'd approach any type of problem. So again, if you were to give me, ACH fraud, I'm going to look at, okay, what exactly do you want me to figure out? And then I have to go hit all those different data sources and find the data points that are going to help me understand this. Now, that's a tricky part, because you do have so much data, and you've got different vendors who may do very similar things. And sometimes you get to a point where one vendor is giving you X for the same exact answer, and another vendor is giving you Y. So for instance, you may have one vendor telling you that, hey, this is a GeoIP address. The other vendor is giving you a slightly different address. What do you do? So this is where you need to have that ability to look at, all right, so these are these two vendors. What other supporting evidence can I get to confirm or reject one of those data points? It gets really, really tricky, just because, again, way too much data at this point, so many different vendors, so many different, and it's not always correct. It's a data quality
What do you
issue.
attribute that to?
Data quality and data integrity from the vendor side. We actually have a vendor that I've been working with for a couple of years now. They can't get their own data to match. And that's terrifying to me. So these are the types of things that, it's so important to have data analytics. It's so important for any CISO to understand, what is my baseline? What does good look like? Because if they don't know what their baseline is, if they haven't figured out their thresholds, if they don't have that ability, then really, how are they fighting the battle? It's almost like you're going in blind.
So when you say threshold, when they don't know their threshold, you're talking about their risk exposure, their kind of like their foundation, their basis. Like,
Exactly.
Are you doing these things right? And if you don't have the right data, then a lot of times you're making decisions based on false pretenses.
Right, because you can't measure what you don't know. So if you're thinking that you have, all your endpoints covered, and you haven't actually done the analysis to make sure that is the case, how do you know that's true? And so you have risk right there, but you just didn't realize it. And with just having the basic metrics, metrics are they're very, very interesting, because they're very different for every single person who wants to look at a metric, and different things are important to different people. But if you don't have the basic KPIs and KRIs, you're not going to understand where your company is at. What is your maturity model? What do you look like right now? And so without that understanding, how do you know what your real risk is? Because you hear so much news in the media about this is happening, that's happening. You're having all sorts of Microsoft sending you like, hey, we've got all these different critical patches that need to be done. How would you decide what's most important for your company? And so you see a lot of people scrambling, oh, this is a critical patch, we have to do it. But let's take a look at exactly what kind of risk exposure you actually have for that patch. How do you do that without analytics? How do you do that without understanding what your baseline is? So I think one of the critical things I find in a lot of companies is, number one, foundational cyber hygiene needs to be done, and may not always be the case. We need to measure that first. Once we get the foundation taken care of, then let's move on to, okay, now how do we make this better? How do we enhance it? So that's a piece that data really comes in handy for that, and to understand what data pieces, what data points you need. It's a matter of really understanding, all right, what are the risks to the company? Now, what are the data sources that I can use to help understand that risk? And then once you have that piece of it, then you can start playing with your data and understanding, all right, this analysis will help me figure out this KPI, this KRI. This helps me dive down deeper into what we need to work on, versus, hey, this actually really isn't such a big deal. We can put this to the side as a lower priority.
It's It's interesting because when you look at data analytics as a whole, I was at an event with our mutual friend Ken Visiana, and we were talking about data governance, and we were talking. We had a presentation go on from a chief data officer at one of the big companies here in Atlanta, and he inherently, as he was saying, this is our data analytics and our data governance and how we're trying to manage our data and identify where all of our data sits and how it's being transported. And I'm like, wow, you're really mapping it out for the CISO. So my question to that person was, well, how have you integrated security into your platform, into your, if I'm able to see all of this, how is this secure?
Right.
Crickets.
That's scary. That's scary.
So if you're able to map all your data, it almost feels like cyber's always sitting in the second seat or, passenger seat or back seat of a business process. And I'm like, why don't you go to cyber and be like, this is the business process we want to do. What do we need to do?
And it's scary that cyber is an afterthought, but I do see a lot of companies now, they understand that you have to partner. So data management will partner with security. And so you're building security into your whole data management process. So right now, when you think about, if you're moving to the cloud, for instance, yeah, you have to understand, you have to have data governance in place. You need to make sure your data quality is there. But one of the big tenets of data management is security. And while people may leave it out sometimes, you definitely need to partner and make sure that it's part of the whole process. We need to be thinking about tokenization, encryption, partitioning data, all of that. And especially now with cloud security, that becomes a huge new factor in all of this.
Right.
Do we have the right controls in place? And of course, IAM, access management, is absolutely critical. And all of that, if you were to follow any of the frameworks, they actually do include security as one of the major tenets of any data management process.
So that's a really good point, because you look at migrations to the cloud now becoming, every company's got a 3-year, 5-year plan of how do we migrate to the cloud. It reduces costs, it helps offset a lot of overhead costs for a lot of businesses and so forth. But then how does data play into that? And how does data analytics help you migrate to the cloud? Can data analytics be used to migrate into the cloud?
Definitely. So the first part would be, number one, a lot of data profiling to understand data classification. So when you're migrating to the cloud, you want to understand what you're migrating, how much PII you have up there, and what you need to protect. So with that, right away, you were having to do a lot of data classification work, which you do through data analytics. So you're running queries, you're doing data crawler queries, whatever you can to figure out. Now, I need to make a point here, because it's not that simple. Because of data quality issues, you're going to have people put social security numbers in there with the hyphens, without the hyphens, all sorts of weird combinations, right? So that's where data analytics really comes in handy, because you don't have clean data. A lot of companies, when they go through their databases and you pull data from one database, you pull it from another database, it's the same information, but it's typed in differently. It's always about the data entry and how it was brought into the system.
Right, like someone's email could be in all caps here and then in all lowercase is there.
Precisely. And then other times you've got spelling errors. You have, you look at, state names. This is horrible, because we should just be following the ISO standards. But people will spell it, the whole word Florida, or with a capital F, sometimes all lower caps. Sometimes you see FL in caps, or FL lowercase, or just a mix. And based on that, when you're trying to push data anywhere, when you're writing a query, for example, if I only know it as FL, my analyst will only type in where the query will be, whatever it is, select all from state equals FL with caps. Now, all those other records that had FL, Florida, spelt in a different way, get dropped from the query. And these are the types of things that when we have to look at what's moving to the cloud, we have to do a lot of pattern work to see, all right, so you have a social security number, you have to use fuzzy logic to understand, is that a social security number and that's also a social security number because one has hyphens, the other doesn't? It's a lot of work. So that's this type of stuff that, there are tools out there that make it a lot easier. There are some great tools that really help you with data profiling. But that's where analytics, right there from the get-go, when you decide that you're going to move to the cloud, you need to start looking at that. So to make sure what you're pushing up there, can you, number one, push it up there based on your company or organization's legal team? And if it is PII data, now you need to identify it before it goes up there so you know what to encrypt and what not to encrypt. And that is huge as the first step at any cloud initiative. Once it's up there, obviously you're going to be protecting it, but still you need to be able to report back to the regulators and the auditors that, yep, we do have social security numbers up there and this is how we protected it. The last thing you want is somebody else finding a social security number in clear text.
Which kind of takes us, because everything you talked about right now goes back to people.
Mm-hmm.
People.
Yes.
Micah puts FL in a capital F, capital L. Tripod puts it as Florida all lowercase because
right.
Tripod has no education. It's a tripod.
Yes.
And people are the greatest weakness in security. It's funny, we always talk people, process, technology,
mm-hmm.
and you go, well, we've got the processes in place, we've got the technology in place, but no one's accounting for the people, or if they are, they're accounting that an awareness training will get people to follow process and
right.
technology.
Right.
And, how do we address the people weakness using data analytics?
So, a couple of ways to do that. My favorite is insider threat, because that is, user behavior to me is absolutely fascinating from a psychological point, but also I have all the data to play with in the world to show that, hey, somebody may not be doing what they're supposed to be doing. So again, baselining is huge in analytics. You find the baseline, your behavior, your working behavior, for instance. So if you were to come into the company, James, I know not an early bird, you like to come in later, you work whatever hours are suitable for you, you do what you need to do. Mike, on the other hand, maybe somebody who starts earlier in the morning and he likes to leave around 4 o'clock. I start, late. I start at 10, I leave at 7 p.m. And I
don't ever know you to start your day at 10
I know,
10
it's
a.m.
usually 5 a.m.,
That's
but whatever.
Yeah, I'm like, you starting at 10? Must be a holiday.
Must be. But we all have our own behaviors, right? So we have our patterns. We're humans. We're just, that's the way we're built. We have patterns. And when we start looking at, you build a model, you start monitoring the person's pattern of behavior. When they start falling outside of that pattern of behavior, that's when you start to get some really good intelligence of what's going on. So if someone starts logging in, the basic stuff that we all hear about, someone starts logging in at 2 a.m., what's going on? Why are they all of a sudden logging in at 2 o'clock in the morning and then they've been online for a good stretch of 4 hours? What have they been doing? And then you start to see, just human nature. It's very, very interesting because you really do get to combine just the emotional piece of this, so the whole, the emotional triggers that triggers pain points, whatever it may be for, just from a emotional view. And then you have all this data of just like their daily, hey, I hit this machine. I never touch that database, but suddenly I'm touching it. I never go to SharePoint, but all of a sudden I am all over SharePoint. I mean, having these models in place and really using data analytics to understand, and we're not even getting fancy at this point. We're not getting into AI, a little bit of ML, but this is basically just what do you do on a daily basis? And let's start putting that together as, this is James' normal pattern of behavior. Let's look for anomalies. And it's all about anomaly detection. And when you look at all these platforms that are out there right now, they're all based off the same thing. It's just looking for anomaly detection in your regular pattern of behavior.
So when you look at these anomalies, it almost seems like what's that movie with Tom Cruise, Micah? Vanilla?
Top Gun?
No.
Minority Report? The one with the cool
Air
screen?
Force. He's always going to go to...
Oh.
You say Tom Cruise, like Air Force guys, they're all like...
That's a Navy movie.
That's right.
What's the movie with Tom Cruise where he's predicting the future? Minority Report. See, I didn't even need you for that, Micah.
Nice.
Didn't even need you for it. That almost sounds very Minority Report-ish, right? Like, You know, you're watching someone's behavior and you're identifying changes and so forth. But how do you start to evaluate user behavior analytics and cybersecurity implementation? Meaning, outside of identity access management, data classification, you know, what I like to call the two basics. At the end of the day, people get to data they're not supposed to get to.
Yep.
Somehow, and there's always a process. How can that be empowered? How can that be prevented?
Well, I think it's number one, the analytics really do help, because it kind of gives you like, all right, what are they supposed to be doing? So that way you can start to, when you start to see that change of behavior, you can go have that discussion with them. And of course, that's something HR and legal normally handles. But what it helps you do is understand where you need more controls. So for instance, you have people visiting certain websites and they really should not be. So what do? You add more controls to start blocking those websites. So it really does help, because sometimes it's just a matter of people not understanding that, hey, we shouldn't be looking at this, or it was a mistake. So, you know, something maybe that is very similarly spelled to some, you know, a malware site or something like that. And you want to make sure that they don't have access to it anymore. So you want to start blocking that off and put those controls in place. So I think that as, you know, definitely if you really want to do something naughty, you will find a way. And people really go out of their way to find that loophole or find a way around the controls. But for those majority of people who do it accidentally or just don't know any better, and didn't realize that kind of site could have malware on it and were just, you know, browsing, for them, seeing their pattern of behavior and seeing what they're looking at, what types of, you know, all of a sudden you're starting to see, you know, they keep hitting this one site, you can go in and set up those other controls and block their activity. So for me, it's a matter of, as we start to see the behavior, we're understanding where we need more controls, more preventive controls. The last thing we want to do is find it too late. So having a daily, you know, hey, here's what happened, everything that happened yesterday, anything anomalous that happened yesterday that is for this person out of the norm. Looking at that and then diving down a little bit deeper to understand, hey, what can we do to protect that asset or protect whatever else it may be, because sometimes it could be a physical security issue. How do we get down and add an extra layer of controls to prevent any further risk?
When you look at risk behavior towards human activity in the cyber realm, right, from a database perspective, from data access perspective, from devices, you know, how do you deal with user behavior kind of like analytics, as what you're talking about, to a BYOD policy? Because that seems to be a very common theme today in America, where, you know, BYOD.
Yeah.
It used to be BYOB. I get that.
Right.
I don't want to spend, it's now BYOD. I mean, we skipped the C, gone directly to D, bring your own device. The device connects to the network. It's got company data on it. What rights does the company have? How can you measure? Because what that person does on his phone, it's his device.
Right.
So how do you start weighing that in? How does user behavior analytics, where's that line for you? I mean, that seems to be, to me, when I look at, you know, kind of data analytics, I go, that has to be the challenge, because in your own network, on your own devices, you can control on a phone that's his.
Right.
Can you?
That is a huge risk, because I take my phone into work, and if I connect to the Wi-Fi, you're going to see what I'm doing. I can actually look at that and see what sites you visited, whatever, because you're on the Wi-Fi network. But my concern is for those people who, you know, I mean, these days you're getting text messages, you can download malware on your iPhone, and then what happens when you bring that into work and then you connect to the Wi-Fi? And that part of it, it's a legal and HR nightmare, because you really, the best an organization can do is delete everything that you have. They can ask for your phone. It's in the contract when you sign up for BYOD, that they can take your phone and they can delete what they need to delete. But aside from that, if you introduce malware through your phone into the organization, that's the one part that we are really stuck from a legal and HR standpoint, that where is the line? And yeah, you're right, because I think that a lot of people who, even every organization, yeah, cybersecurity, hopefully majority of them are very, very careful, but the rest of the staff, maybe the ones who are more in business side, whatever, they may not have that knowledge or that background, so they may be clicking on everything and visiting sites that have malware. What do you do for them? So that's something that actively, it's a debate that's happening, that has happened at many of the organizations, because HR and legal can't cross that line and tell you what to do with your phone.
What's the right policy in your opinion?
Right policy? I mean, honestly, I would like to go back to not bringing your own device and not connecting to the corporate Wi-Fi, because, and I know everyone's still going to bring in their stuff, but if you have your own personal device, I don't want you connecting to the corporate Wi-Fi. And I know people would hate that, but from what I've seen at a company I was at previously, it caused a lot of headache, and we had no recourse but to deal with the consequences. So that, and then people losing their phones all the time, that, and they don't report it, because guess what? It's not company property. It's their own personal phone. So if they lose their phone, if they don't have, password security or the PIN number or whatever it is, all that company data is out there, and they never report that. They're not going to tell you that, oh, I'm sorry, I lost my phone. It did have all this information on it. They just go buy a new phone, and then they request to have the company email reinstalled on their cell phone. But you don't know why. No one really tracks those numbers. It's something that, I really think is very important to track. But people normally don't track that kind of stuff. And how, if someone didn't come to you and tell you, I lost my phone, it had all the information on it, had all of our email, you're not going to know.
Seeing that again goes to like user behavior, which is the biggest threat to any organization, is user behavior. And a lot of times in a large corporation, not talking about small businesses, large corporations, you lose track of stuff, and stuff ends up in weird places. I mean, lose your phone on a vacation in China.
Exactly. And that's my biggest concern. That, I mean, honestly, I see the number of, when people would all of a sudden have to reinstall the company email. Like, why? Why are you reinstalling it? Like, what is the reason for the reinstall? Like, did your phone just mess up and you just need to reinstall it? Did you get upset one day and delete it and then decide, I really can't live without my company email on here? What was the reason? Did you lose your phone? And where? And what happened? I mean, that's the kind of stuff that we're never going to know, which is what really scares me, because there's so much information. You have everything on there. I mean, you have access to all sorts of IP. You usually have your company intranet on there too, so I can just access that and get into it. It's just, everything is, if you've got the thumb, if you haven't moved to facial recognition, whatever, I mean, it's just a matter of, do you have enough security on your phone so if you lose it, you're not going to be in trouble?
Right. And then does the company have access to even, does the company have the right to even monitor and access your phone? Right.
Exactly. And that's a line you can't cross. You have to be so careful about it, because even as insider threat, you're looking at certain things. It's like, from an organization standpoint, that everyone wants more data. They're like, well, we want to know everything about this employee. Well, you really can't. I mean, you have to respect the employee. You can't just be like, I want everything. I want their fingerprints. I want, to be following the police blotter and understand everything that's happening in their lives.
You mean we're not communist Russia?
No, we're not. Surprise, surprise. So you really have to, employees have rights too. And so it's a fine line, and it's something that is, when you're head down trying to protect the company, I think sometimes people may forget that, you just can't be looking at all that information.
That's really interesting, and kind of takes us to the next topic I want to talk to you about, which is, building a team in cyber. Because you obviously didn't come from cyber, you came from fraud.
Right.
We hear about the cyber work shortage. I feel some of it is, when I talk to people, I understand the need. I hear the need, and it seems like for some of it, there's already automation that solves some of the problem, but people aren't yet ready to trust automation, right? It's like a cordless vacuum cleaner. No one trusted it until the shark came through, because people were like, well, is it going to have enough electricity to suck all the dirt off? What's on your carpet? It's a vacuum cleaner, right? But automation in cyber is starting to become a real kind of it's not a trend, it's the future. Right? I mean, we saw this in medical care in the 70s where they had a shortage. They didn't, yeah, you hired more nurses, but you couldn't fill the amount of nurses that were needed.
Right.
For the shortage, it was a lot of automation. It was a lot of automation, right? And so how do you start to build a diverse team in a cyber analytics? Like, what do you do to build your team? What kind of experience do you look for? What kind of people do you look for? Is it all cyber, or do you look for maybe people that come from different backgrounds? What's kind of your approach to that?
Well, my thing is, first of all, especially for the analytics piece, they need to have that level of education. There's a lot of math involved. There's a lot of programming involved. So the education piece is a must. After that, I do look for, they don't necessarily have to be cyber or fraud. I need to see that, do you have the passion and the drive to learn new things? And if you have the cyber background, because sometimes you have people who have all the certs and everything, but they can't seem to think outside that box. And that to me is, when you're looking at cyber, you need to be thinking about 50 different things at the same time, because there are so many different data points that you need to consider and so many different ways to solve the same problem. I always look for people who, if I throw something at them, what would you do in this situation? And they will tell me, I need to look at this, this, and this. I'm like, all right, that's good. Because you need to have an open mind. You need to be very creative in your solutioning. And you need to always think like the bad guy, which is actually kind of fun sometimes, because you're like, all right, if I was a bad guy, what would I be doing in this situation? How would I break into the company? And what data would I need to do it? And when you start thinking like that, and when you meet some people when I'm interviewing, it's a lot of fun, because you get some really creative stories out of people about how they've solved a problem or how they've, figured something out. And it's because they're open-minded, and they'll be, hey, it's not just employees. Yes, we need to look at them, and these are the different things we need to look at. But also, hey, what about our firewalls? Were they configured correctly? Did we have anything on our side? So I am definitely looking for me, it's, you have to have the education. If you have cyber and fraud background, that is a huge plus for me. But mainly, I'm looking for people who can understand and see the big picture, and then who have that analytical mind, who, here's a problem, I'm going to solve it. It's a big puzzle. How do you put this puzzle together? And those people who enjoy that kind of work, because it's not for everybody. It's very detail oriented, and sometimes it can drive you nuts because there's so much data that you have to look at. Do you enjoy that type of work? So it's more of a personality thing when it comes to cyber analytics. Once you have all the education piece down, are you willing to learn? Are you willing to listen to more of these webinars? Are you willing to attend conferences? Do you want to learn more about cyber? Do you want to learn more about fraud? And some of the best people to listen to, aside of course from your podcast, but there are other people out there who, were once criminals and now have, gone down a different path and are helping and are out there talking about what they used to do. Learn from them. And that, I think, is one of the most important things that you can do. So for me, my team is made up of people who, data analytics, of course. That has to be the biggest thing.
You bring up a good point. I always say you got to think like the guy who's coming at you, and kind of understand how to build your defensive posture and so forth. One of the very interesting aspects I always ask in an interview is, what's your tell me about a breach you followed. What you think was very interesting about it? And I rarely get answers.
Really?
Like, a lot of times people will talk to me about a big breach, and they'll be like, well, Equifax was really fast. And I'm like, why?
Right.
Well, the sheer size of it. I go, don't give me a news headline. Did you look into it? Did you read the 92-page congressional report? Did you read some of the people who were talking about how, divisive and decisive that breach specifically was, where the, kind of like the lack of existed? To me, you talk about certs and all these different things. I look at a cert, and, I'm finishing up for my CISP now. And, and I look at it, and I'm just, and as I'm studying, I go, great, great, great. Not a box, a flat road. This is just a journey. I'm going to learn so much more. There's going to be hills and there's going to be valleys in my journey on this road as I do my CISP and, other certs I decide to go down. And I'm kind of like vlogging my CISP journey right now. I've got way too many funny moments of just like reading something in that fat book, and I go, no, like everyone. Works. Yeah, that's not how it really works. But I get the need for certs. I didn't quite at the very beginning, and I was kind of very like, certs, we're letting the bad guys know how we think, and I think that's the instructor's problem. I think as the instructors that are teaching the certs, if you're a good instructor, you're going to let people know, like, here's the book, here's the test. You got to get this to get a job. You got to get this for people to look at you. You got to get this to show that you have a baseline knowledge. But this is all this is. It's a baseline knowledge. It's not the whole enchilada.
Yeah, exactly.
This is the tortilla.
You make the burrito.
You make the burrito.
There you go.
Like that one? That's a good one, Micah. That's so good.
Write that one down, Jason.
Write that one down. Trademark it. I give you the tortilla. You make the burrito.
There you go.
And you you make a wrap. I don't know. Asians also eat stuff that's wrapped. What's wrapped and what do you eat that's wrapped? Rice, spring rolls.
It's called kimbap.
Kimbap too.
And then you have your spring rolls, your egg rolls. You also have your Korean barbecue tacos, your Korean barbecue burritos.
Yeah, but Korean barbecue tacos is an American invention of Mexican. It's like America to Korea.
That's not true.
I've been to Korea. I've never seen Korean tacos in Korea.
That's because they use lettuce instead of a tortilla. But
And they don't call them tacos.
Well, no, they call them something else in Korean that translates to taco.
Micah's our Korean ambassador. And we thank you and your supreme leader for everything that you do for us.
It's our pleasure.
I really do appreciate it. Before... what buzzword would you take out to the backyard, shoot it in the head, and bury it 6 feet, maybe 10 feet under?
Big data.
Yes.
I hate that term. Oh my goodness. It's used so incorrectly. And it's frustrating because you actually end up trivializing the work behind it. I mean, big data was supposed to start off with it's the volume, velocity, variety of your data. That big part of that little buzzword, that's where I think, it's all relative. The volume is relative to your company. What's big here is not going to be, size-wise, it won't be the same. But there's so much more work that goes behind it. And when you say, oh yeah, we're doing big data, what does that even mean? Are you just governing all your data? Are you putting it together in a data lake? Are you doing the analytics? And it's just the way it's used. Oh yeah, that term just drives me nuts.
So for you, it's big data. Big data?
Hate it.
Buried.
Hate it.
What technology do you see emerging that's really going to help the cybersecurity practitioner?
I was just on a call yesterday with a vendor, and I love AWS. I really do, just because they make, from a data analytics perspective, they make our life so much more easier by pulling all the data in from all the millions of repositories you may have, being servers, databases, everything, logs, all of that. You're able to pull all of that into one place. Make sure you secure it, but once you have that in one place, it makes any data scientist, data analytics person's life amazing, because you can get your metrics out, do all your dashboards, do all your reporting, do all of your models, your AI, ML, everything you need to do once you're there. What I'm seeing is a lot of new companies that are, SIMs that are able to, using AWS technology, they're able to pull in data within 15 minutes. They're able to pull all my log data in within 10 minutes. Blew my mind, because this is usually something that takes a very long time to do. And having something that's as easy as click here, click there, bring it in, and then have the ability while you're bringing in to encrypt it, that to me was absolutely incredible. And I think the emerging technology that I'm most interested in is the fact that from a data analytics perspective, I'm going to have my data ready for me. It's going to be legally, no one can touch it, because they're going to say, hey, it's all encrypted, PII is there, but it's encrypted, we're fine. We have the ability to, of course, there are so many other tools out there that we can use with these SIMs that help us do our data profiling, do our data patterning, making sure that we don't have PI in the wrong places. There's so much more that we're able to do in a much quicker time, whereas it can take you 2 to 3 years to get a whole data lake set up, do all your data governance and everything else that goes with it. And now you have the ability to speed that up to, seriously, within a day, you can have majority of your data that's sitting in, I mean, every company has like hundreds of databases. Have all of that pushed out and have it in one place. That, to me, that emerging tech is incredible. And it's changing a lot. You have a lot of companies who do SIMs, but now the newcomers in the space, they're pretty incredible.
That's, whenever I ask that question, I typically hear quantum, AI, and you've kind of brought a very, very different perspective to it, and I appreciate that. It's nice to hear, not any of the buzzwords of emerging tech, but really the vendors that are solving real problems, talking about those guys, because I think that's so important. This market is so overcrowded with vendors.
Oh yes.
And it's very hard to differentiate the real ones from the ones that have been able to raise a lot of money and get a lot of marketing and get a few big names to back them, and then they go, well, I've been to enough vendor pitches where their presentation starts with, here's who we are, here's who's given us money, here's how much money we have, here's what we do, here's why we're better than everyone else, and here's why you should buy from us. And I just wish more people would get rid of that presentation and just give me 2 minutes about your value, solve my problem.
And that's what I noticed. I don't know if I'm allowed to say this, so you may have to cut this out. But RSA last year, like just walking around and talking to all the different vendors, everyone claimed AI and ML. And I was like, do you really know what that means? Because a lot of what they were doing, honestly, was just analytics. It wasn't the ML, it wasn't the AI that they think they're doing. And those are a few more buzzwords. So if I had a list, go down that. People don't really know what they're saying. They don't understand that there's a difference between these. In
my wooded backyard, there's about 17 graves that are marked AI ML.
Oh, really? Okay, good.
You've brought us the first big data grave. Micah's got some digging to do today. The ground's a little cold outside, but
This is going to be hashtag big data.
Oh, no.
Kind of wrapping up our time together, what a lot of people don't know is that you and I actually went with a group of other CISOs to Israel, spent a week just in the scorching sun in June.
Oh, yeah. It was hot.
It was hot.
It was really hot.
But it was enlightening, wasn't it?
It was amazing. So I have to say to anybody who's considering going, you must go. It was an incredible experience. And thank you for arranging that, because that I just get excited thinking about it.
So it wasn't I'll explain to the people who are listening. We took a group of CISOs to Israel in June of last year, right? And it was a non-vendor fly-in, meaning we didn't meet any vendors. We met with, I think, 2 or 3 vendors, but they weren't salesmen-y. They were very...
Yeah, they just gave us some
practical.
Good talks. Yeah.
Practical, I'd say. And the talks were more about collaboration and kind of problem solving rather than the, here's what we do and here's how great we are.
Right.
And so, but outside of those maybe 2 or 3 talks, the rest of the time we went into Israeli companies, spoke to Israeli CISOs and some of Israel's largest companies and their major, Israel's electric company, which was...
That was incredible.
That was great. And so we're doing that again in March, and Kausar's here, and I was, I haven't had a chance to talk to anyone else on the podcast from that trip, and bring them on the show. But can you just share a little bit of your takeaways from it? What were some of the things that you were expecting that maybe you found to be completely different, and what are some of the things that you were like, wow, this is fascinating?
Well, I mean, to me, it was absolutely mind-blowing how advanced they are in cybersecurity. Like, I honestly, I don't know why, just assumed here in the United States we'd be more advanced. But going over there and just seeing what they've accomplished, and just even their vendors, when we talk to the vendors, they actually gave us intel. Like, they shared really good information with us. It wasn't a sell at all. So that was the biggest thing for me, was the willingness to communicate and share knowledge. Because going to a couple of those places, like the energy company, I mean, I asked a million questions and everybody welcomed it, which was, it was exciting.
And mind you, we were talking to Yossi, and a lot of people, you know, there's this one guy here, I forgot his name, but he's like the first CISO in America. Uh-huh. Well, this guy was a CISO for like 38 years. I mean, you know, we were
so down to earth, and
he was just sitting there, open book. I mean, I was sitting in that boardroom. I'm like,
I couldn't believe
jaw
it.
dropped.
Yeah, I was amazed because, I mean, I came in with a million questions because I wanted to see how it's done there. What can we learn and maybe do over here? And he didn't, there wasn't a single question that he didn't answer. And I was like, I could have talked to him forever. And, you know, it was just amazing to see. And one of the banks that we went to, they were really, you know, encouraging that we share, like, obviously no one's going to share their secret sauce, but It was about, hey, look, we're seeing this threat. We're going to let everybody else know so they're prepared too. That blew my mind, because I think we need more of that. We need more sharing. Obviously, you don't want to give away everything. You need that competitive edge. But we can share things like, oh yeah, hey, we're getting hit by ACH fraud really bad right now. Just expect it, you know? So I feel like maybe we're starting to make a little bit of progress in that area, but the way, I'll never forget that young lady. I did forget her name, but she was just incredible when she was like, hey, we can start sharing intel with you. And, you know, you can share stuff with us too. And I was like, wow, that is amazing.
Was that a dessert?
At one of the banks. No, I can't remember which bank it was. I think we went to 2 different banks. Yeah. But it was just incredible. And at the energy company, oh my goodness. I mean, I had my notebook out and I just took down everything they said because it was incredible to hear. And just, you know, usually people are afraid to share that kind of information. Like even here, when you're sitting in a conference, like, hey, can you share what tool you used? And people don't want to share that kind of info.
Right. And I don't understand that. I think that that's not your competitive edge. The tools that you use,
it's what you do with it.
Right. It's that's not your competitive edge. In cybersecurity, unless you're a cybersecurity vendor, if you were, as practitioners, I have no problem sharing stuff that I do with my peers. I don't at all. People ask, well, how'd you do this? And I go, well, this is how I did it. Go do it yourself.
Yeah.
It's going to help you. Why not? Why are we, I feel like that's one of our challenges that really also kind of, I mean, having lived in Israel and been there, I always knew information sharing is a high priority. It's very important over there, but going there and being even as part of the organizers, right? Like just, you know, kind of tagging along. And I've been on these tours a bunch of times, you know, you're just fascinated by it. I think, you know, seeing a SOC and a NOC together kind of operating from a physical and cyber perspective to me was just mind-boggling. And the effectiveness of it, the way everything was organized in the flow of communication around was just...
That like, SOC was so impressive. Which bank was that? I can't remember the name of the bank.
Bank Leumi.
Yes. Yeah. And just even the organization of their SOC. It was like, okay, step 1, step 2, step 3. I'm like, God, the amount of organization and just, it blew me away. I was very, very impressed. I would love to see more organizations here in the United States kind of follow suit and get their organization together. And also just that information sharing. I still to this day absolutely floored with how much they shared with me, because I was asking all sorts of questions. Hey, do you use AWS? Are you okay with putting all your PII data up there? Like, oh yeah, of course, this is how we did it. I mean, obviously not all the details, but just, we took care of the controls, XYZ, we nailed it. We're fine, perfectly fine. We feel it's safe. We have no problem with it there. I was blown away with how open they were.
What's one of your main takeaways outside of information sharing? Did you have anything else that kind of mind-boggled you while we're out there?
I mean, the place is amazing. The place is absolutely incredible. Just overall, it was such a great experience. I think the other thing was just, when we traveled, we're in that bus with everybody, all these different CISOs from different companies, from different places, from Colombia and everywhere else. And just having that time on the bus to pick people's brains and talk to them and just forming those relationships, that was absolutely incredible. I mean, it was such a great experience because we had a great bunch of people. Yeah. It was such a fun group.
It was a fun group.
And it was like everybody was very much like, hey, you know, excited to do the next thing, and let's look around, let's see what's going on. And just overall, I mean, everyone had something to say after every single event that we went to. And it was so great to have like this uninterrupted time where you could learn, you could absorb, and then you could discuss it with everybody with you. I mean, like in our regular lives, you have work. Cybersecurity is such a demanding field. You never know when you're gonna have to work extra hours, and then you've got your family. So it was just like, you know, there's always something going on between the two. And then being in Israel, away from all of that, and just like this uninterrupted time
Immersed.
to talk. Yes, it was just absolutely mind blowing.
Not to mention the beach,
Okay, that was gorgeous. Yeah,
the shisha
the shisha was awesome.
on the beach.
I have not had
The
shisha.
hookah.
That was as good
The
as
la-
that shisha.
That was the last time you had shisha.
I've had it again. It was just like, man, this sucks.
Yeah, that
Does
was
not compare.
It does. It absolutely does not compare. It was a great trip. Good food.
Yes,
Like
definitely.
everywhere we went, good food.
Yeah, and I mean, we were so well taken care of. It was just like you guys thought of everything, so it was an incredible trip.
It was a great little trip. I want to thank you for coming on that trip too, because it was such a fun trip. Like I think one of my takeaways is and many will never let me put this picture up of me passed out as they suckered us in to hear Netanyahu speak, and then we got the braless.
Oh, that lady.
Yeah, we had the nipple show.
Oh God.
At one of those events. While we were there, we attended Tel Aviv University's Cyber Week, and we attended the morning that Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu spoke. Got great seats too. Like,
Oh yeah.
we could smell Netanyahu. It was so close, almost. Right, but we had like Brian Krebs in front of us, and
No, that was
Israel's
incredible.
energy
Yeah.
minister. We had a good group of people in front of us, and I passed out,
Snoring and all.
snoring and all, with headphones in my ear,
Uh-huh.
listening to a podcast because it was better than what was going on stage.
The vendor show was not appreciated by James.
At all. Zero. I felt so suckered in. I felt
Yeah.
I was so depressed. I was like, I've wasted 2.5 hours of my life sitting here.
Waiting for Netanyahu. But I mean, hey, he was a great speaker, so
Yeah,
it was
no
good.
presentation, no script, no nothing.
Just
He
got
was
there and
just
started talking. That was incredible. That was
like,
incredible.
yeah, that was so Netanyahu-esque, right? Almost like President Trump in that, you know, if he's not given a prepared statement, he's just pulling stuff like, what card did I pull today? What's my fortune cookie say? Let's talk about that. And you're like, whoa.
He was really cool.
Yeah.
Great speaker. And then again, I have to say that, you know, you guys really went out of your way to help us all go visit the sites that were important to us. So I got to see Masjid al-Aqsa, and I was extremely excited.
Yeah, that was
a little terrified.
gave me a little bit goosebumps, yeah. I remember you going up there. I wanted to go with, and they're like, no, you're someone's gonna recognize you in there, and you're just gonna end up, you know, hostage situation.
It was crazy. And I couldn't believe they actually did quiz me to make sure I was Muslim. I was like, wow, that was
How many
interesting.
surahs did you have to say?
Well, 3. And then they asked me a bunch of trivia questions. I was like,
You're like,
and I'm like, okay, fine, whatever. I went to Sunday
when was he
school.
circumcised?
Not to that extent. Let's just say I'm glad I paid attention to Sunday school. So it was just, it was pretty funny. Yeah, I was a little terrified, but wow, I still, like, looking at those pictures just brings back so many memories. And it was just such a spiritual moment for me. So that was something that I know you guys went out of your way to do that. And thank you.
That was, you know, this time we're going in March. It's not as hot.
Oh, well, thank God.
Yeah, it's not as hot. That
was like 100-degree weather every day.
We were sweating.
Yes.
Profusely.
We were like dehydrated.
No, we had good water though.
It didn't matter. You stood outside for 1 minute. You were just like melted
Yeah,
away.
you're like,
Go
okay,
drink more water.
Drink more water. Let me finish 7 more bottles.
Exactly.
Yeah, I mean, if you think of this, I lost weight. The only time I gained weight in Israel was after you guys left, and I stayed for like 4 more days.
Oh.
Because when we were there, I lost weight. Because as much as we were eating, we were like walking. We were active. You know, I was swimming every morning in the beach. That was great.
Yeah, it was such a great place to stay right there next to the beach. It was incredible.
That breakfast.
Yeah.
That breakfast. The food.
That breakfast was huge. I mean, everything you'd possibly think of. It was
Everything.
just, yeah.
Every sort of dairy, every sort of meat, any kind of omelet, any
Everything.
waffles, pancakes,
It was
the
insane.
veggie bar.
Oh, yeah. There was so much going on. And it was funny because when
It
you
was
saw,
no country
like...
buffet.
No. No, it was not.
Martha, is the prime rib there?
Oh, gross. No. Oh my god. And I'll just never forget like the dinners and everything where it was just like you finish something, they just keep coming back and like refills.
That lunch that we had in Jaffa when we came back from Jerusalem, when we were that place that we went into.
Oh, right.
Where they were making the bread fresh, like on the sides. Remember, as we were watching them just bake it, bring it out. I was like, oh man,
that was incredible.
Those places
stuff.
don't exist here.
No, they don't.
We don't have that food culture.
No, not at all. Here, I think it's more fast food. If anything, I mean, like, yeah, you go, you sit down, you eat, but then it wasn't like there, and it was.
I saw a Chipotle with a drive-through. That's when I knew like America's done.
That's the end of humanity as we know it.
That's like Chipotle drive-through. Yeah, I'll have a burrito with white rice, steak, mix of beans. Yeah, put a little bit of both. Then pinto and black. Like, what? Get out of your car! Like, I'm dying to see the person who pulls out of a Chipotle drive.
Yeah. Oh my god.
With a burrito, like you sit there, you make a mess. How you gonna drive? Like you're. You know?
Well, that's scary. It's distracted driving to a whole new level.
No, it was a blast, and thanks for coming. I'm glad you found it helpful.
Oh, it was great. It was great. I would go again in a heartbeat.
Yeah, well, thanks for coming to Israel. Thank you for coming to the podcast finally.
Well, thank you for
this
having
was
me.
an awesome episode. Thanks so much for sharing with us. For those, Kausar Kenning, she is the VP of Cyber Insights Analytics. I am so sorry.
That's okay.
At a very large financial institution that will remain unnamed. But you can find all about Kausar on LinkedIn.
Thanks, James.
But these are the very important talks of kind of sharing our views in different ways we can utilize, and kind of like you said, thinking outside of that cyber box. Mm-hmm. And you've enlightened me to think differently. I know when I listen back to this episode, I typically I can now listen to myself on an episode. And ask Mike, the first 15, 20 episodes we did, there was no way in hell he could get me to listen to me. He'd be like, James, listen to this. And I'm like, no. La, 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 la. And now I'm much better at doing that. And so I always kind of listen back to episodes. The one I did with Sean Walls, if you haven't listened to it, the CISO at VisionWorks, was fascinating. So much amazing data. Christine Vanderpool. Wow. Christine was like a trove of information. It's people like you and those great practitioners that help make this podcast what it is. And so thank you.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate it.
For those listening, Kausar Kenning with us in the studio today. We have so many more great guests coming to you soon. Next week on the show, we'll have Nir Valtman. Woo! Nice. Nir's coming back. He's now at Finestra, has left Cabbage. We're going to be talking about his new role and everything he's done in a much larger company than a small unicorn, and the transition from one company to another in cyber, and all the challenges and the good stuff that go along with that. So make sure you tune in next week. I've brought Nir back to kind of talk about that switch. Nir's unbelievable, just smart as it gets.
He's great.
He is. And that's it. So make sure you tune in daily for our daily cyber briefing, 10 a.m. live on YouTube. So go subscribe. Make sure you get the alerts. You get your 10-15 minutes of your most pressing cybersecurity news headlines, the real facts, not all the hype around it, but what does it really mean for practitioners. If you have any stories, tips, anything else you want to suggest a guest, you want to come on the show, go to cyberhubengage.com. You can find all the information there. Thanks so much for listening. Thanks so much for tuning in. Enjoy the rest of your weekend. This is James Azar saying Shabbat Shalom.